Hello, writers. This is author Sharon Hughson coming to you today to talk to you about something that every writer who wants to be an author needs to know about, and that is editing. What are the different types of editing? Because there are different, and hey, which type do I need for my stuff? All right, not all editing is created equal, and not all editors are either. As someone who has worked with multiple editors, some that were freelance editors I handpicked, and others which were editors for publishers who I was working with, they all had different styles, they had different purposes, and there were different levels of editing. So, what are the different types of editing? Okay, so last time I was talking about getting feedback, and that one way to get feedback was to get a manuscript read by a professional editor, but not edited necessarily speaking. It's just feedback on your manuscript. So manuscript evaluation is what most of them call that. And you would get 3 to 5 pages, maybe more, depending on the length of your manuscript and the editor, that would tell you the strengths, the weaknesses, and give you some recommendations for what would improve your writing, what the next step is for you and this story that you had them evaluate. So that is a service they offered, not necessarily one of the types of editing. So the 3 types of editing are developmental editing, content editing, and proofreading. So first, let's talk about developmental editing. You might also hear this called macro editing. Okay, and so macro is what? The big issues. Okay, so a developmental editor reads through your story and finds the plot holes, finds the inconsistencies in character, finds weaknesses of the plot. If it doesn't have a good structure, if it has a sagging middle, if there are scenes that seem pointless, if a character is inconsistent, if a character isn't likable, if a character has no arc and needs one. The developmental editor will discuss all that and find all that in your manuscript. So this is a pretty intensive manuscript type of evaluation, and a lot of editors like to go through a manuscript 2 times. And so when you're looking at all this big picture stuff and putting a lot of feedback that goes right in the manuscript so the author can find it, it takes a lot of time, therefore it costs a lot of money. So developmental editing would be your most expensive type of editing. The second is content editing, line editing, micro editing. So it could have a bunch of different names. So what it is not is looking at big picture issues or grammatical line, oh, this spelling, this is a typo, blah, 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 blah. What it is looking for is good sentence structure, clarity. Yes, they will find some typos, find misused words, inconsistencies. Your character has green eyes in chapter 2 and blue eyes in chapter 8. Things like that. That's what a line edit, content edit is looking for. So they're trying to make it more clear. Some editors will also offer insight on this. If they feel like something doesn't work, they might toss out a comment, hey, this didn't seem in character for your character. You might want to revisit that. Things like that. But mostly they're looking for clarity and smoothness of your prose, polishing for the prose so that it works, so that they'll make sure your openings are good and your endings are good, those sort of things. So that is the middle kind of editing, and a little bit less expensive than a developmental edit. Now the last type of edit is proofreading. We all know what proofreading is, right? Or do we? So I took newspaper class in high school. In journalism, you learn how to mark up copy with the copywriter's symbols. I still do that when I proofread. If I do it longhand for myself, when I read through my own manuscripts myself, I use those same type of markups because it's ingrained into me. That's how I first learned how to do it. So proofreading is looking for misspellings, misuse of words, commas that are out of place. You don't have a period where you need to. You forgot to capitalize stuff. You capitalize things you shouldn't capitalize. All those things that are really conventional things that have to do with the grammar of the language, in this case English, that your readers expect, that helps them understand your reading clearly. Quotations and that paragraphs are in the right spot. All that's proofreading. So what type do you need? Well, let me tell you first. If you go through a traditional publisher, you will get all three types of editing. You might have a different editor for each one, or you may work with one editor for all three. I've done it both ways with the publishers that I've been with. They will give you a developmental, say, hey, wait, maybe you want to rethink this, blah, blah, blah. Most of the developmental things that I've had were not serious rewrites, but I have had friends who say it's a serious rewrite. They didn't like how things were handled and it had to get rewritten completely. So that was going to happen first with your developmental editor, and then the content editor, and then proofreading. Usually the proofreading comes in Galley sheets. When you work with a small press, usually they expect the author to do it. That was the case for me in all of them, that I would get the galleys, this is the format, this is the final file, find the errors. And you had to write them down separately and send the email. It was on page blah, blah, blah. This line, it was supposed to be this. And that's how they fixed them. So on a Galley sheet, if you had actual physical Galley sheets, then you can mark them up and make the changes directly onto the Galley sheets. So let's talk about your manuscript and what type do you need? Well, ask yourself a question. Do you know your story's strong? Do you know your characters are likable, that they are relatable, that they have a journey and that journey is clear and corresponds with the plot journey? If you know that, you probably don't need a developmental editor. What a lot of indie authors will do is they will count on their beta readers to catch the developmental type of issues. So that is what I did for my self-published things. I expected my beta readers to catch those plot holes, catch those inconsistencies, tell me when a character didn't make sense or was acting out of character, if they didn't like how their journey was or whatever. Okay, all those things I relied on a beta reader to do. So if you can find good beta readers who understand the conventions of your genre and are willing to do that, a lot of authors exchange beta reading with each other. That is one way that I've gotten some really great beta reading done. And I still work as a beta reader for several authors who appreciate my input on making their stories better. So if you feel like your manuscript hits all those buttons, then maybe what I would suggest to you is a content edit, okay? So that is gonna go out and make sure that you are, the prose makes sense and you don't have inconsistencies in what your character's doing and place names, and the timeline makes sense. Those are the sorts of things that a content editor, a line editor is looking for. So I might recommend that. That is generally the type of edit that I paid for with my self-published books. Of course, I did also hire a proofreader because I found out that myself, even if I give it enough time, yeah, I'm a professional proofreader. Yeah, I do a great job. I can find a lot of things, but can't always find all the errors in my own writing. So this is another place where you could swap services with another author that you know, if you're an indie author who you know is a good proofreader, that you'll proofread for them if they'll proofread for you. Well, provided you are good at proofreading and will catch those errors. So generally proofreading is only a couple cents, a couple hundreds, of cents per word. So it's not super expensive. So don't cut that corner and send out something that is riddled with errors to be published. So what type do you need? Hopefully that helped you. And I will say one more thing, that a lot of people who are going the traditional route, who are going through an agent, do not hire an editor before they seek an agent. They're hoping that the editor will or the agent will value their story enough that if they feel they need to work with an editor, that they will do that at that angle. That isn't true for everyone. If you feel concerned, so a reason why you might choose to hire an editor after you've submitted your manuscript for a while is if you get no takers. And maybe they respond and say, well, the manuscript wasn't super clean, or, you know, there was a lot of structural issues with your story, or if you get feedback that might indicate to you that this manuscript is really not ready to be shopped to agents and publishers, then that might be a time when you would also determine that you want to work with an editor. So if you're looking for someone to edit and you have more questions about this, drop by Write Your Book Nook and ask a question. I'm always happy to answer questions about editors or lead you to a source where you can get that information. I also provide editing services, so I will post a link to information about that down in the description as well. So that is what I have for you today about editing. Do you need macro, micro, or proofreading? Or all three. I hope that you're not discouraged by hearing this about editors, and that every good story has at least one editor's eyes on it. The best stories probably had 3 editors' eyes on it. So go forth, my friend, and write your book, because your story matters.